Hello everyone, my name is Erica Stafford, and for my presentation is about racism and its impacts on families. So this particular presentation had me actively reflect on my life and how racism has affected me and my family. As I did my research, I learned not only past issues in our country, present issues in our country, and how our future is looking to improve on those issues and situations that present racism within a population with children and their parents, and how their nuclear family, communal family, and national lives are affected nationwide. So in my presentation, I had took a step back and wanted to understand what racism has done for me. So I had a lot of different avenues that I could research in. Couldn't personally pinpoint a particular avenue to go into because I am currently still trying to discover my passion in social work. So racism is a very broad topic, and its effects and impacts on families is also very broad and largely has different scopes to what really impacts a family. So to introduce my topic of racism, in the actual definition or description of racism is the dehumanization of a person. This just means belittling of a person, of what their beliefs are, where they were brought up, how they look, what they look like, and how our society has really developed as a whole on what racism and how it impacts our communities and our state of mind here in our country. Racism is a global hierarchy of superiority and inferiority along the lines of humans and their political, culturally, economically produced and reduced in our countries because of capitalism. And this had started in the Western Catholic modern day and also our past, and also was an effect in our colonial development in our world system. So that just means that we have been dealing with racism long before obviously this presentation, but really long before we really acknowledge what racism was in itself and defining it and providing that type of interaction societally. It's been going on since the dawn of time. So as I did more research broadly, racism is dependent on the different colonial, historical, diverse regions of the world. So we're not the only one that has been affected by this. This has been an international and national issue since races have been defined and their own sex and their own sections. Racism has been expressed through color, ethnicity, religion, culture, and language. So this means if anybody speaks another language, many people suffer from belittled words, remarks, even interactions with people and how they interact with them. So that goes into like the different risks of how racism has had a lead on how segregation was developed in houses and how segregation was developed in schools. And also racism has limited the networking, the social networking really of people because of the mindset and the development within a nuclear family. And later on, it affects a person's employment and opportunity, and that then affects a person's health when being exposed to racism. So families such as Latinos, Blacks, people from the Middle East, because they came to a new country, they are of another type of upbringing, a different type of way of life. So people that do not understand that particular way of life, verbally and or physically or mentally, belittle that person because they don't think it's something that is within the means of how they think they should be or what they should look like. Later on, people experience this in long periods of time. Stereotypes are made for incarceration. Illness falls upon many people because of how stressed and how affected they are by their society and their interactions with everyday people. Unemployment is at a very, very large high because of the effects that people have on other people in a workplace. Largely, racism is one of the largest impacts on health when immigrants come and migrate to new countries, not only our country. Racism is what I've learned, not only a national, it's also very international when there are different races traveling back and forth between different countries due to racial discrimination. Later on, I started learning about the history and where it started in our country. Here in the United States, before the 1800s, really there was a marker of how our particular society had developed with racism. Obviously, we had Abe Lincoln as our president, who obviously had the direct Declaration of Proclamation, which had freed our slaves here so that they would be able to advance properly and not be owned such as property. And racism was developed in the United States amongst our society because of certain American citizens and other countries migrating here to grow in our society, and different views were brought in with the American Revolution. Speaking about equality, our history has involved slavery and racism throughout many different generations. Slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment because of the fact that racism was defeated during the Civil War. So this made us change our personal view as a whole on how our society no longer wanted that type of involvement on how they treated human beings, because they were people, they weren't property, they weren't animals. But many who grew up with that type of mentality still continued to develop that mentality because of different racial differences. And enacting a law based on, state rights, excluding blacks for meaningful social economic life, just means that they were trying to give them a better life and than what they were given. In the 1960s, Board versus Brown, this was a legal regarding legal racism, and this was during the Eisenhower presidency, where civil rights movements were happening, laws were being passed, things were being implemented to then promote equality amongst the races. So when people began to learn about this, racism then developed within the last several decades, and as a result, it's affected our line of work as social workers, as educators, to follow different programs and contexts in regards to educating people on racism, per the National Association of Social Work. A lot of programs are being interconnected, and it just comes to show that different parts of social work are now implementing different important points on what racism is and what how children are being racially discriminated in child welfare and what they're struggling within their low income families and that they're middle class. A lot of them have, they're part of different ethnic groups. And mainly a lot of these issues that consider racism have developed and had barriers regarding, food, healthcare, housing, safety, education, even employment. So racism has been affecting all aspects of a person's life of a different ethnicity. As I continued to kind of research a little bit farther about how racism has impacted families, is that here in our society, I've learned that there's many different things that are happening. I'm personally not politically aware. I'm just becoming involved because of my interests and things that I'm doing within my development as a social worker, as my development as a lifelong learner, and that the impact that racism has on the population that I want to work with is something that I learned that racism comes in all shapes and forms, whether it be in foster care placements, whether it be in the mental health facilities, whether it be in schools. It could be, within a community-based program. And there are now different programs, local and national, that are being provided to now just negate that and educate people in regards to what's going on. In general, there's different programs that have revealed the different struggles of racism and how it impacts families. And they provide different workshops, dialogues, seminars, and trainings, and there's certain agencies that I've provided here to two particular one in Pennsylvania and then another one that's an international that was founded in Virginia. This global agency, it works with over 100 countries, and they work together to provide diverse services in the community along with states, regions, and international involvements, showing that the transformation of inequality is a conflict, and at the same time we have to be honest and accountable, along with showing that there's a justice of equalness and peace and amongst individuals. As this is happening, these trainings are being done, partnerships are being made, and it's showing the different aspects of what an agency that works international does and provides, educational institutions and gives individual businesses and corporations to help advance within the community, whether it be with their faith, but showing that support that they're able to, while they are experiencing racism in their community, they have community resources that still support them along the way. And a local organization here in Pennsylvania has shown that they partner with different agencies all throughout different states to work a network within our different regions to develop skills and address different changes of an attitude and biases in regards to the different obstacles that are happening within inequality, and promoting equality of how a person lives, what they're able to teach us through their different cultural differences, along with just institutions in general providing, anti-discriminatory programs and historical context in regards to how our country has developed, along with, understanding the changes that come with dysfunctional behaviors due to racism, and promoting effective partnerships. So right now, racism in our country, it has its highs and its lows, which I've understood, but mainly is that there are programs out there are agencies that are trying to diffuse this dehumanization of a person and the family, making them feel inadequate to be a part of our society. So at this point, I've learned that connecting with the different resources that an agency has pertaining to equality is what needs to be promoted. And as a social worker, I'm beginning to learn how agencies